What is it that people are seeing? Is it a man? An animal? A myth? Or something else? Are they delusional? Are they lying? Some are pastors. Some are law enforcement. Some are military. If they are delusional liars, why do we trust them to lead us to God? To put people in jail and to protect our way of life? Why are their words and actions good enough for that? But when it comes to experiencing something out of the ordinary, something fascinating, something possibly terrifying, they become a fool, a joke, an idiot. Not here. We are the Big Dog T2B. Welcome to the show. Hello everyone, my name is Jack, and welcome to the Big Dog T2B. Tonight we have episode 3 of our story time with Greg. In tonight's episode, we're going to hear some graphic depictions associated with deer hunting, as Greg tells his stories and makes his points. So listener discretion is advised. Also, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for our content, and leave a comment down below. And hit that like button. It helps us grow our channel. We would like to thank the listeners who commented on our last video. And again, I apologize if I mispronounced the names. Morcaden, Christine Smith, PBX Drummer, Hoosier Squatch, Tim Egan. Always overwhelming praise from Tim. Thank you very much. And the same thing can be said for Cajun Jules, Jimmy Harrison, Bassman Kelly, Barry Browning, Rex Goodrum, Robin Lynn Griffin, and Patrick Noble. Thank you very much for leaving a comment on our last video, and thank you very, very much for your kindness and praise. Also, don't forget to visit us at www.bigdogt2b.com. You can also reach me at gentlemanjack@bigdogt2b.com if you'd like to be on the show, or you know anyone who would like to be on the show. So let's get on with it.
And where the road that went on out of the field to the river, right there in the fork of that, there was where the field kind of peeled back to the right and that road went out to the left, there was a white oak tree that lightning had hit and the top had fell out of it. So there's this big pile of brush and limbs and stuff right at the base of this tree. Well, that day when I got there a little early. I went in about 2 o'clock, and you know, it's bow season, so it's not getting dark till on 6-ish or so. So I had, say, 4 hours before it got dark. Well, I wind up, I go in there and I told a little bitty foldings. Bow season, you don't have to have hunter's orange. I'm full real tree camo, head to toe, face mask, everything. All right, I go in there and I even take a set of little pruning snips, and I cut some little old saplings off, some little pine boughs and stuff, and I shove them into these limbs around me, and I rake out a real clean spot that's at the base of this white oak where I can set my stool and my feet are on this fresh dirt. I raked a little clear path where I could walk in and out of that, which was only about maybe 8 or 10 feet back into the grass. So I'm just barely out of the field, just behind all these limbs and stuff. Well, I'm sitting there, and even the stool I was on was a little short stool. It wasn't probably 14 inches off the ground, maybe, if not, it probably wasn't that high. It was a short, like a low seat stool. Well, I'm sitting there, and I'm turned where I'm concentrating on that corner of the field. Well, about, I don't know, 30 minutes or 45 minutes before dark, across the field, and this field's narrow, it's about 30 yards across maybe, but straight across from me, it's all hardwood around that side of the field, and there's like a little swag, and it's full of like cane, like just wild cane bushes, just river cane we call it, and that stuff is just thick. Well, on out past that cane, I start hearing something walking, and it's bipedal, and it's heavy. It's coming through these oak leaves, hardwood leaves, and it's just steadily walking. Well, that thing walks up there below the bottom corner of that field where that deer had been coming out. And I'm sitting here going, oh no, oh no, oh no, because I know what it is. And I'm sitting on the ground. I'm not even no security of even being an elevated stand where I can see. And I'm sitting here and I'm getting severely nervous. And that thing walks up there and stops out of the field, I would guess probably 25 yards. Well, then it changes direction and goes around, going back to the north, around the outside of that cane break, on the other side of it from me. And it walks up there toward where my ladder stand is. And it gets probably 35, 40 yards from my stand, and it stops. Well, it stays there for a little bit, just a few, like 20 seconds or so. It turns, and it comes right back around the cane break and goes back around the end of the field, and it goes around the corner below me, and it's on the slope between the end of the field. Remember earlier I told you that it was about 20 yards out of the field, and then you round it over the hill, and it sloped down a 45-degree slope, which was about 75 yards to the water. That thing was on that slope just over that hump or the crown of that hill where I couldn't see it. This thing couldn't have been over 30, 35 yards from me, maybe. That thing gets right out down below me at the end of this field, and I hear it stop, and I hear it pick up a log. It pulls a log, picks a log up off the ground. And anybody that's been in the woods and moved anything, especially looking for firewood, or if you're moving something or whatever, if you take a tree that's been felled and it's laid there and started rotting, if you pick that thing up, it's got all these little, it looks like little roots and stuff that grows into the ground, and when you pull it, it's almost like pulling Velcro loose. How you'll hear it rip loose, like and rip. All right, that's what I hear. I hear this. It sounds like a giant piece of Velcro being pulled off the ground, and then I hear the tree hit the ground, and it's like boom, 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 whop, and it hits a standing tree. I heard it pull loose, get thrown to the side, roll, and hit another tree. Well, I'm like, what is this thing doing? Well, then I start hearing, it sounds like you've got a leaf rake, and you're raking, instead of raking leaves, it sounds like you're raking this soft earth, this dirt, and you're throwing just like big double handfuls of dirt, and you're just slinging it across these leaves. So it's just like going out across it. And in my mind, I'm going, what is this thing doing? Well, then it dawns on me, the only thing that I could put together was that this thing had moved that log, pulled it off the ground, and was raking through that soil looking for bugs or worms or grubs or something. So I've got a picture in my head that I've got a Bigfoot that's probably squatted or kneeling right here on top of me, and he is finding something to eat. Well, as I'm sitting here trying to sort all this out in my head, from the same direction that one, when I first initially heard it, I'm hearing more bipedal foot traffic. And it's coming the same way. And it comes through and gets right down below the corner of the field. And instead of turning like that one did and going around the cane break and then going back, it just comes around the corner and goes to where that other one was, where I'm hearing the dirt and all that stuff. Well, it walks up, and where I'm hearing the earth, the dirt coming out on the leaves, I hear this other one walk to that exact spot. I just cannot see them for the terrain. If I had been another 20 feet that way, or if they'd been 20 feet toward me, I would have been staring straight at them. But I just cannot see them. But they're right there. And y'all, them things that one walks up, and then I hear them like a couple of like low, like, and then all of a sudden, for no better choice of words, I hear samurai chatter. These things crank up, and this one would talk, and then the other one would pick up, and then that one would talk, and then the other one, and then this one, and then the other one. It's back and forth and back and forth. And y'all, by then, I think you could have cut my throat and I wouldn't be able to drop. It's like all my blood's poured down into my legs, and I don't know, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, look, I have got to get out of here. And they're communicating back and forth and back and forth. And I sat there for a good 3 or 4 minutes. And I'm trying to plot, okay, do I sit here and wait them out, or what do I do? And then I get thinking, okay, I know there's 2 of them. And if they come up into the field, they come around the field, I'm right here at the edge of the field, I have got to go. And, by now it's like, it ain't going to be long till dark. And I start weighing my odds, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I've got all the leaves out of the way. I can stay crouched down because they're so close that I'm afraid if me at 6'1", if I stand completely up, they're going to see the top of my head. So I devised a plan of I'm going to ease out of this stool, be super quiet, and I'm going to stay on this clear dirt, this soft soil, and I'm going to get into this green grass. I'm not going to step on the leaf. I'm going to scoot across this field about 40 yards, and I'm going to hit that road that's going out. And look, every year when I would plant this, when I'd go in with the tractor to disc this field up, to plow it or disc it up, I would always drag the disc down that road, and it would cut up all the leaves and stuff in the road. That way, when I was walking in or out, it was pretty silent. There wouldn't be that many leaves to step on. And I knew if I could get into that road, it was mostly like pretty big flat rocks and dirt. I could get on out toward the truck and at least get further away from these things. And y'all, I wound up. I got up out of the stool or out off the seat, and I stayed squatted as low as I could stay bent over. I felt like a question mark going out across through there. And I stayed ducked down and got across out in the field, crossed the field, and then I started up that hill. And y'all, I mean, I was trying to go quick and stay bent over. And like I said, I wasn't in great shape back then. I was 300 pounds. I'm less than 200 now. But anyway, I done got winded. I was pretty much just borderline hyperventilating. And I stopped I was probably a good 100, 125 yards from where I initially left from. And I stopped. And really, a lot of it was me trying to listen to see if these things had figured out where I was at, or that I was there, and they were coming, going to come up there where I was. And y'all, at that distance, I could still hear these things mumbling back and forth. And I was like, yep, no, they're still down there. I'm going to the truck. And y'all, I boogied it on with the truck, and I was proud to see my pickup and get out of there. But I've had a lot of people try to get me to imitate it. And I can do a horrible job, but it was nearly like you had something, I dare say, like in fast forward, but it sounded like a foreign language. It sounded like mad Russian people or mad Chinese people, and it would start off, and they would like repeat the same syllable or the same sound, and it was like undecipherable. And if you want me to, I'll try to do my best. But I'm not gonna make any promises it's gonna sound worth a flip. But
at bare minimum, it'll be entertaining. Go ahead, brother.
All right. Well, y'all hold the laughter down to a bare minimum. But y'all, what I heard, it went a lot like this. It would go, oi, 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 yeah, oi. And then the other one would go, wee, ah, wee, oi, 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 ah. And then the other one would pick back up and go, wee, 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 oh, yeah, oh, yeah. And it would go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. and it was two different voices, but they would repeat the same syllable. Like I said, it would go hoi 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 ah, and it would just bounce from one to the other and one to the other and one to the other. And guys, when I say loud, I'm talking about me doing that, if you were in the truck with me and me doing that would be half as loud as what they were from, say, 30, 35 yards. It was very deep. It was very loud. And to this day, I still don't think those things ever knew I was there. The wind was a crosswind. It wasn't in my favor. It wasn't in their favor. I really believe that, honest to God, snuck out of there and they never knew I was there because, well, they may have by the time I got up there and got the truck door shut and started the truck up to leave. But like I said, I traversed from my seat all the way up that hill going out, and it, over 100 yards, and I could still hear these things down there communicate back and forth.
Nate and I looked at each other and said the same thing. I'd like to get Coonbo's take on it. That sounded a lot more Native American to me.
Yeah, that sounded like Native American to me too, but I'll have to say, I've heard them talking back and forth a couple of different instances. I heard it down over in Colbert County, Alabama, coming from either side of a real deep hollow, and there was one that was on my side of the hollow and south of me, and I could hear it down in there. And then and then there was one on across the hollow to the east, and I'd hear it answer back, similarly, and they started moving towards me, and I decided it was time to go. And unfortunately, I decided a little bit too late. So when I tried to go straight from the stand that I was in to my truck, the one that was on, or ones that were on the side of the hollow that I was on, cut me off, and I kept every time I'd try to go straight towards my truck, they'd start throwing stuff all around me. And I ended up having to go a circuitous route to get back to my truck. The other time was up in Missouri, right behind my house. My wife had heard them down in the hollow behind the house, and sort of to the southwest of the house, and I heard them down there also, but I also heard them getting answers from to the southeast of there, and at a distance. But like Greg says, I know, because I know that property. I mean, I know that the ones that were further to the southeast were a good 200, 250 yards away from me, and I could hear them clear as a bell. And I mean, the sound carries terrifically good in the woods. The ones that were closer were probably, 100 yards or so from me, maybe 80 to 100 yards. But they were talking back and forth between each other. So what Greg said about the way the sound that those voices carry, that's absolutely correct. And it doesn't, the thing about it, if you and I were trying to talk to each other from 150 yards away from each other, we would be almost in a low yell. You'd be able to hear our voices straining from trying to generate that volume. These were talking what sound to be, just as easy and relaxed a manner as what we're talking right now, or as what I'm talking now. But you could hear it clear as a bell, even from 200, 250 yards away. So
I think that's got a lot to do with environmental conditions too, because the place I lived in Maryland, it was a house in the middle of 61 acres. There was a house that was about a quarter of a mile from me. And under the right conditions, there was one stand of trees. There was this drainage that went through there between us and that house. Other than that, it was open fields, mostly for hay. Right before we moved down here, they started planting it in corn. But they could step out and talk in a regular voice, and we could hear them. I couldn't tell what they were saying, but we could absolutely tell that there were people talking in regular voice, you know, not yelling or anything, and about a quarter of a mile away.
I know out there on our farm, which is on the river, it's not unusual to hear people talking out there on the river, and you go out there to look to see where they are, and you know, they'll be all the way over on the other side. And the lake is over a mile wide there. And now again, you cannot understand what they're saying, but you can hear their voices clearly. But these guys were communicating over you know, that distance of 150 yards or so through the woods.
Another thing that sounded on when they were talking. I mean, it just the not really the tone, but they was real fast, and it like they were almost excited. You know, that's kind of the way it made me feel, that they were excited about something. And I don't know whether that's so or not, but that's just the way it sounded. You know, it sounded like the conversation was an excited conversation.
The ones that I heard down in West Colbert County was real excited. Had a very excited, you know, it was fast, you know, rapid fire.
Mm-hmm.
The ones there that down behind my house, not so much. But what I heard down in West Colbert County was excited, you know, fast, staccato kind of talk.
Yeah. Jack, another thing that I'd like to touch on, if you got a minute.
As long as you want to keep talking, I'll keep recording.
All right. Well, the thing that I wanted to bring up was that these things are very opportunistic as far as they'll capitalize on a free meal. We wound up, man, you know, like I said, I've deer hunted my whole life. We've hunted all over the state of Alabama pretty much, and killed a lot of deer. I mean, my dad, he killed lots and lots of deer, and he taught me the ways of the woods. And man, I can kill deer, hold up my end with about anybody. But we had a lot of deer that got stolen. As of right now, the best I can tell you, we've had 6 deer that I know that were stolen in the last 11 years. And I'm not talking about that, you know, I shot a deer, knocked it down, it got up, got out of the field, and, you know, we went to where I shot it, found real good blood, tracked it, real good blood trail, and then you find a big puddle of blood, and then the deer was just gone. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about shoot a deer, the deer crumples up in the field, edge of the field. You go to the deer, you walk up behind it, you nudge it with your foot, the deer don't wiggle. You walk up there, you grab it by the horn, you pick its head up, its tongue's hanging out, it's not breathing, it's a dead. It's DEAD, capital letters, dead deer laying there on the ground right there. All right? There's no way.
Not just merely dead, but really quite sincerely dead?
Yes, sir. I'm talking about they mean it. They mean it 100%, mean it that they're dead. But, you know,
Coonbo's going to click his heels together here in just a minute.
There you go. One of the ones that sure enough stands out to me was the upper field that I told you about earlier, the one that Al liked to hunt so much. Usually I'd let Al hunt it. I'd let Dad hunt it because Dad was on the up years. I lost Dad last April, and cancer got him. He had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and turned into leukemia, and it took Dad away from me at 82 years old. But anyway, I went in there that evening and to hunt that upper field. Then the ladder stand sitting there, and had my Browning laying up on the barrel, laying on the shooting rail, and the buttstock laying on my thigh. And I was just cutting my eyes. You don't turn your head because the deer will pick up on it. And I'm just cutting my eyes around the field, just back and forth. And at the far end of that field, and that was a lot bigger field than the bottom field. And the field started off a lot bigger. And then later on, a few years after we'd had that, I took the dozer back and made it a little bit bigger. And the field wound up there. It was about 190 yards long. But I look up, and it's right at 175 yards, there's a deer. It stepped out in the field, and anybody that's deer hunted much will tell you can be watching for them, and you cut your eyes for 3 seconds and look back, they'll be 20 yards out in the field like it popped out of the ground. Well, this buck was standing out, and he was broadsided to me, facing toward my left, and the first thing I saw was his horns. And he wasn't no giant, but he was a real nice deer. And I just eased forward and slid my rifle up to my shoulder and put the scope on him. And number one rule that Dad taught me a long time ago is if you think he's big enough that that's what you want to kill, don't count horns. Kill the deer, and when you kill him, you get to count the horns as many times as you want to. Don't guess. That's the prime way to get buck favor, is to be counting horns before you kill it. But anyway, I put the rifle right behind the front shoulder, flip the safety off, ease the trigger back, the rifle recoils, and this deer like spins him nearly halfway around, and he hits the ground. Well, I picked my head up off the scope and looked, and that son of a gun rolled back over on his belly, off his side on his belly, and as I dropped back down in the scope, that deer digs his back hooves in and like just lunges. Well, the deer was probably about 20 feet, not yards, but feet out in the field. When his hooves dug in, he just shot like a bullet right back into the old growed up thicket. Well, I'm sitting there, and I know he's hit hard. I know he's hit hard, and he ain't probably not going to go far. So I sat there for a couple of 3 minutes, and I climbed down, got my rifle in my hand, climbed down out of the tree, and I start walking 175 yards or so across the field. I get within 30 feet of where the deer was at when I shot him, and I could see blood everywhere. And I get to looking, and there's 2 or 3 pieces of lung tissue as big as my pinky finger. And I'm going, oh yeah, he is dead. They got the bright pink, foamy blood blown everywhere, indicative of a good lung shot. Well, right there where he went out of the field, there was a little bit of sage grass that's nice and, light brown. And that sage grass is over knee high. And it looks like you've drug a bloody mop across that sage grass. And then the deer, the deer trail coming through this thicket, it's almost like looking through a 30-inch tall culvert. There'll be just a hole in all the bushes and stuff. But if you go through that initial little hole that they come out of, it'll usually open up where you can stand up. Well, I get right there where all this blood's at the edge of the field, at this big hole where the deer are coming out. And I squat down and look. Well, about 25, 30 feet up in this deer trail, I see white, which was the deer's tail. And he's laying on his side. So I step over all this bloody sage grass, and I kind of like duck walk about 8 or 10 feet, stand up, and then walk another 10, 15 feet to the deer. Walk up behind him, kick him on the rump with my boot. He just jiggles. I step up, and it's a little narrow, say 2.5 feet wide, kind of opening up through there. And it's, plenty enough for me to stand up. It's the little pines are on up, probably 14, 15 foot at this time. But I can stand up. Well, I walked up to him, And I step up, kind of straddle one leg on each side, one at his belly, one at his back. Well, I reach down and grab his horns, and I pick his head up. Well, when I do, the deer doesn't have any brow tines. And for people who don't know what that is, it's kind of like an eye guard. It's the first points that branch off the main bands right above their eyes. Well, these horns just had two little knots there. It didn't have points. But he had three more good points on each side, so he was a nice 6 point. I shot him for an 8, but I couldn't tell, and I wasn't counting horns. I just seen he was a pretty good rack. And I'm going to say that this deer was probably close to an 18-inch inside spread. He was a nice buck, and the buck should have weighed between 185 and 200 pounds. This deer's tongue was hanging out. There's a gaping hole blowed through his side as big as $50. Pink blood is poured out. There's a puddle done coming out from under the deer. He's laying in his pine straw. He's dead. I mean, I've done picked his head. His head's just flopping. I picked his head up, got it in my hand. He's not breathing. He's not doing nothing. I lay his head right back down. Okay, now the work starts. I got to go out and get the truck, bring the truck in here, and I'm going to have to try to load this big old thing by myself. So I walk back, duck walk out, stand up in the field, walk across the field about 40 yards, go into the 200-yard road that goes out to the gate. I walk out there, unlock the gate, swing it open, get in my Dodge 4-wheel drive, drive it to 200 yards, pull out across the field after I put it 4-wheel drive, back up to this, this big hole in the vegetation. I back up, get out, drop my tailgate, look on the ground. Here's the blood, the pink blood. I walk over there where I just went like 10 minutes earlier. I squat down and look up in the hole. The deer's gone. He ain't there. And I went, uh-oh. Well, I'll go ahead, duck walk, go back up in there, look around. I can't find a blood trail. I can't find nothing leaving. No drag marks, no nothing. There's no hair pulled off like coyotes would have pulled on one. There's nothing. There's no deer. There's no deer to be found. It washes over me. Oh, yeah. I've just fed the family of boogers a free meal. My wife killed a real good 8-point. Real good 8-point. We left to go get my Jeep. Had to walk about 400 yards out of the other place that I hunt that's across the river I was telling you about. That would have been her second real good buck that she's ever killed. I called that deer up with a grunt call. She shot the deer. The end of her gun barrel was less than 6 feet from the deer. I called her. She was sitting on a stump. I called the deer up to her. I watched her shoot it with a .270 Browning rifle from less than 6 feet from the end of the gun barrel to the deer's basically rib cage, lungs, right behind the front shoulder. The deer flipped over on its side, kicked 3 or 4 times, got up and staggered, went about 50 feet and collapsed. We watched the deer take his dying breath, quit kicking, head dropped, tail kind of curled up and then collapsed. We stood there and watched that deer 5 more minutes. I said, "You want to walk down there and drag him?" Or I said, "That would be easier. Let's just go get the Jeep." She said, "Well, let's just go get the Jeep and we'll come back and get him." We walked out. I called my dad and I said, "Look, Wanda killed a real nice buck a while ago. We're fixing to go get it." He said, "Well, I'll come help you." I said, "Well, where you at?" And he told me. I said, "Well, come on." We drove around there in the Jeep, got over there. There's a pool of blood big as a wash tub. No deer, nothing. She shot another buck. Basically, same scenario. It gone. Dad shot a big doe in the field. He killed it. The deer laid dead in the field across the field from him. Right at 200 yards that he shot across the field, and the deer piled up. He killed the deer at about 3:20 in the evening. He texted me, or actually I texted him. I said, "You get one?" He texted me back, said, "Yeah, I killed one of those big does you told me had been coming out." I said, "Well, good. Just don't get out of the shooting house and maybe a buck come out." I stayed in my stand to right before dark, came out. Time I got down, got out, went and got my Jeep. and then had to drive nearly a mile through woods roads to go to where Dad was at. He was in a elevated box stand, a shooting house, and he just stayed in there and waited on me. Well, it had done been dark for probably, I'm talking about pitch black dark, for probably 20, 25 minutes at least. I pulled up to where he was at. He came out of the shooting house, came down the steps, got in the Jeep. I said, "Where's she at?" He said, "She's laying over at that road where you told me they'd come out." I said, "Okay." So across the field, there was an old log road that come in, and there was some sage grass that I didn't bush hog right there at that log road. He said she fell, her head's laying in that tall sage grass, and her body's laying out in the field. He said, "She's laid there," said, "I ain't even moved since I shot her." But she's laid there this whole time. Said, "I heard her blow out, what we call a death blow. A lot of times they'll like exhale and just kind of deflate when they die." He said, "She ain't moved." Said, "I watched her." He said, "I kept the scope looking over that way till it got so dark I couldn't even see through the scope anymore." We pull across the field with my Jeep, and I've got big KC lights up on top of it, not on the winch bumper. Had 4 KC lights on and the headlights on bright. Go across the field, pull up over. I said, "Where's your deer?" He said, "She's laying right," and he pointed out the windshield and he stopped. He said, "Well, it was laying right there." I said, "Well, there ain't no deer laying there." He said, "Well, I know it was." He said, "She's laid there this whole time." I said, "Daddy, Squatch, you probably got your deer." "Nah," I said, yeah, probably got your deer." So I pulled my Jeep up there and stopped about 20 feet from where he said the deer was laying at the center of that log road coming out. I get out, leave the Jeep running, got all these lights on, get out, walk up there, and I've got a real good flashlight in my hand also. So I get up there, and here is a pool of blood. In the outline, the grass is still mashed where the deer's body was laying. No deer. Deer's gone. And I look over in the sage grass, and probably a couple of feet from where the deer's body was a big oval impression in the sage grass that was, I'm going to say the entire impression in that grass was over 18 inches. And I step over around it, look, and I look back, and about probably 4 or 5 feet behind that, I found another big oval impression in the sage grass. And then about 4 or 5 feet on past that, I found another one. I found 3 big oval impressions, let's just say between 16, 18 inches long and probably 9, 10 inches wide. And I told Dad, I said, "Right here's where it walked up." I said, "Right here's Boogerman tracks right here." I said, "That thing got your deer." He said, "Well, something got it because it was here." It was here. I said, "I know." I said, "I'm not doubting." He said, "That thing had to wait until it got this black dark where I couldn't see and then stepped out and got it." I said, "That's exactly what it done. When it knew that you couldn't see, it stepped out, snatched that deer and left." Well, that incident is in a book that a man that I hold highly in this world, Mr. Bill White, a.k.a. Tal Bronco, the author and a researcher for more than 50 years. He wrote a book, and it was about some Bigfoot encounters here in North Alabama or in the southeast. And he before I met Coonbo and Nate, and Troy and Jim, he was pretty much the only contact I'd ever had with anybody that really knew what was going on. And that old man, I owe him a debt of gratitude for him steering me in the right directions on how to conduct myself in the woods with these things. Because that old man gave me a lot of advice on how to be cautious and how to conduct myself when dealing with these things. And but anyway, I called Bill and told him about what had happened, and he told me, he said, "Yes, that thing got you deer." And but anyway, I went back to this same place, and like I said, we looked all out in the field. I looked around a 100-yard spot around this deer, or where we thought the deer, where it did die. Nothing. There was nothing there. Nothing. No, the deer's gone. Well, I went back like 3 days later, and pull up in this big field. Like I said, this field is big. It's up 100 plus yards long. And I drive my Jeep around, and when I get to where I can see across this field where that deer had come up gone, there was something laying on further out in the field, just a little further around. And I thought it was a coyote. So, you know, you try to eliminate every coyote you can see. So I just turned my Jeep and stopped. And I grabbed my rifle and stick it out the window of the Jeep and dial my scope up. Well, it wasn't a coyote. I wasn't real sure what it was. And I wound up, I put my rifle back in the window and drive around and pull up over there. And I pull up, stop, and get out. And what I had laying there was a deer carcass. And this deer carcass was stripped. The insides was gone. All the sweet meat, all the heart, the lungs, the guts. There was a little bit of the guts left, but the liver, everything inside was gone. Now, over there in that corner of the field where Dad killed this deer, when I had disced that field that year and planted it, I ran out of seed. And it had came a rain right before, like the day before Dad shot the deer. And the carcass was laying out in this plowed field with no grass around it, and the soil was soft, and there was no tracks around it. What there was where this carcass had hit the ground, scuff marks. You could see where the carcass, it was like an indentation, and it was scuffed up, the ground was disturbed, and then it was like the carcass had rolled about 2 or 3 revolutions and landed. There was no coyote tracks, no dog tracks. There wasn't even any buzzard tracks around it. Nothing. There was nothing around this carcass in the dirt at all. The dirt was undisturbed other than you could see where it hit the ground, and it rolled a couple of times and came to rest. What there was right behind the front shoulder, there was a bullet hole and a rib. And then across on the other side, where the bullet had expanded, it had cut a rib in two. So you could see where the bullet passed through the carcass. The deer's neck was spun around and twisted like a bread tie. The hide looked like you had grabbed the hide right in the middle of the center of the back, and like you were trying to rip open a bag of potato chips. The hide was pulled up over the hind, what was left of the hind end, and drug out on the ground, and like pulled up toward its head. It looked like you had opened a bag of potato chips and just ripped the hide from front or from the middle toward the front and toward the back. That thing was, obliterated. It was big chunks of meat were gone, and it was just like something had ripped just big chunks of meat out of it. But it was almost like, hey, I appreciate the free meal. Y'all can have the scraps. We don't want what's left. And like it had heaved it from the edge of the woods, like 20 yards out in the field. The thing about it that I know 3,000% that deer carcass wasn't just there. Because when I turned my Jeep around the night that Dad and I looked, when he shot it, I turned my Jeep around and I cut the wheel out in the field. Now, mind you, I had the 2 headlights and these 4 big KC lights on. It's like daytime in front of this Jeep. When I turned the Jeep around, the tracks from my Jeep are still very, very obvious. The track where I turned the Jeep around, the tracks from the Jeep was within 20, 25 feet of where this carcass is piled up on this bare dirt. That carcass was not there, no way, shape, form, or fashion that night. That thing was snatched and took away and brought back and flung out in that field. So, I don't know. That was one of the craziest things I've ever seen.
Greg, the way you described how the deer's hide was ripped open, I've seen that before with where they've killed dogs and other animals, where they just grab it, and like you said, they grab it somewhere on the back or the side, right in the middle of the body, and yank. Half part of the hide goes up over its shoulders and up over its neck, and other half goes down over its rump.
Another thing that I want to add too on that, back on Tal Bronco, Bill White, is the book that he wrote. A couple of the stories that's in that book are mine and Dad's stories on on things that's happened to us here. And some of the pictures in that book are pictures that I actually took myself of that carcass. So those pictures has been published, and I signed off a waiver or a statement to him and faxed it to him and sent him the actual photographs that I took of that carcass piled up in the field. And those pictures were in his Bigfoot book. And he's also got one of the pictures that's in that book are of a track that I took pictures of here that in a branch off down in a big deep canyon gorge in the side of a branch where it's hard packed sand, and that track measured out a little over 9 inches wide and was right at 16 inches long, and it had 5 very, very distinguishable toes, and the track was so fresh. And something that I don't ever hear people mention is like where the toenails hit the ground. This thing wasn't claws. It wasn't like pointed claws like a cat or like a dog or a coat or a bear even. This thing had toenails like human toenails. You could see out in front of each toe, whereas it stepped, its toenails stuck in the sand and pulled out. And it was like you took a knife and cut slits in the sand out in front of the toes. But the toenails, the track was so fresh that where the sand had pulled out, the little balls of sand around the track were still damp. They hadn't even dried yet.
Yeah, that picture's on page 54.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it now.
So you got his book.
And I want to add.
Yeah. Yeah, the book is called Southern Bigfoot Files, Alabama.
Yep, that's it. The copy I got it's autographed, and he wrote me and Dad a little thing in there thanking us for our contributions to the book. And I'm telling you guys, that old man right there has got a special place in my heart.
He is a heck of a good man. I think the world of him. And I got to spend about 3 days with him here a couple of years ago. And he is a heck of a good man.
Amen.
I wish that I could spend a lot more time with him. He is a wealth of knowledge. But but besides that, he's just a terrifically good person.
He got tickled at me, Jack. Bill did, because when I had my first sighting, when that one crossed the road in front of me, the first person that I called on the phone was Bill. I was sitting in the road where that thing hit the woods on me, where it went into the thicket. I got the truck stopped right there, and I jerked my cell phone out and I called Bill White. I was on the phone with Bill White within a matter of seconds of seeing that thing. And it's hilarious now, but he kind of prodded me a little bit about me being so excited, because I don't think I was making a whole lot of sense when I was on the phone with him. And he you know, I was tore up excited. But Bill was the first call I made sitting in the road.
I'd love to hear a recording of that phone call.
Yeah, I think I would. I don't know. I mean, I know I embraced the redneck. It sounds super realistic. So if you got me stirred up, and I may have had the male till it stuttered. I don't know.
He had that thing of, me telling him, I've talked to him on the phone several times, and, you need to call it what it is. And I have a hard time with that because I haven't seen what it is. Very knowledgeable guy. He's not a young man by any stretch, and I hope he's still with us. But still very, very animated, very excited whenever he talks about the subject.
But Jack, going back on, you said several times tonight, that you hadn't saw one. I've had 3 sightings, and they were a long way apart. And when I say I've had encounters, when I say dozens of encounters, when I'm labeling an encounter, I'll label an encounter as stuff that I've told you tonight, that type stuff. Being escorted out of the woods, coming out of my stand, hearing them break limbs and kind of escort me to the truck, or hearing maybe going to the woods and hearing wood knocks, or hearing the high pitched single tone whistles back and forth, or hearing, them, just everything from benign, just, hey, I know they're here, they're whooping, they're growling at me, whatever. From that all the way up to them throwing a fit and me wondering, honest to God, if I'm gonna make it out of these woods alive, because this thing's tearing the woods up and he's mad. I'm talking about everything in between. And there would be times, Jack, that we would go through a deer season. And, deer season in Alabama goes from October 15th. It did go out January 31st. We got a lot of days of deer hunting, and I tried to stay in the woods all I could. And I would hunt a lot. But, there would be years that I would have 20 encounters. Now, I may go 2 or 3 weeks and not have nothing. And then the next week, if I hunted 4 days, I'd have 4 encounters. I never knew, and it may cut off like throwing a light switch, and it may cut on like throwing a light switch. There was no rhyme or reason to it. And the thing that I couldn't plot, because I didn't know how many I was dealing with, because some of the encounters were benign. There was nothing. I mean, it was just a gentle encounter. And then one would be belligerent and going stupid. I could never figure out if it was the same one doing it, or if it was a different one, or if it was the same one. Why he's mad today? I didn't do anything different today than I did the last time. So I could never pin it down to rhyme or reason anything that I did different to make it a worse encounter or a better encounter. But it was just, I've had dozens and dozens and dozens of encounters. But I've only had, personally, I've had 3 sightings. The one I told you about crossing the road over here. All right. Then another time that I had walked in the exact spot where Coonbo, Nate, me, Cheryl Corntassel, Jimmy Osmer, Tom and Melanie, Tim's sister and brother-in-law. There was a pretty good gang of us one night. We were over here the night that as Nate said, the frogs shut up on us, and then they'd come back on, and then we got to hearing this super high-pitched squeal, and the frogs would shut off. From right there where we were standing in that road, about 30 feet behind where we were parked, there's a log road that goes out, that goes beside the land that my cousin owned. And I went out there, and there was big pine timber, and then it opens up right at the top of the hill that goes off to the river. Well, it goes down in this big hollow, and the bottom is kind of flat, about 20 yards wide. Well, from the top of the hill, it's probably 150 yards or more to the bottom down to the flat, and then you go up this other hill that's real steep to go out the other side. Well, I had snuck through those big pine timber, and the ground, the pine straw was a little down. So I could go through there really quiet. And from the gravel road out there, it's about 150, 175 yards. I had snuck out there, and this was up in the day, say 2 o'clock, 2:30. I snuck out there, and when I come out of the pine timber, I was just right to the point where I could start seeing down in the bottom of the hollow, but I was walking in that pine straw, so it was quiet. About the second step that I crunched a leaf, right down toward the river, down toward the bottom of this hollow, dude, it sounded like a horse got off the ground. Just leaves and stuff just crashing and limbs breaking. And it's big timber, it's big hardwood, but there's still a lot of small stuff in with it. You can see a long way, but you can't see good. I see something black come off the ground, and it takes off running on two legs up the opposing hillside, and I'm getting glimpses of it. You know, I'd see it, and then it's trees, see it, trees, see it, trees, trees. Then that thing went up that hillside going away from me. You see these guys that race these dirt bikes professionally, if they had started at the bottom of the hill where that thing did, it couldn't have went out the top of that hill on a dirt bike as fast as that thing went up that hill. And it was gone. I mean, it was gone. But it was big, and it was upright, covered in hair, on two legs. And I'm talking about, I think the technical term for it is hauling ass.
And it didn't have to make two trips either.
No, sir. And no, sir. But the other time that I have saw one is this past spring. I was over here, and I was out really late at night. I'm not going to say for why, but I had a specific reason. And I dang sure wasn't Bigfoot hunting. I was coming back home, and I was roughly by the road about 1.75 miles or 2 miles from the bridge that Nate and I were talking about, which is right here by where I've had most of my encounters. I came over a hill, and there's like two hilltops that are about, 200, 250 yards apart. Well, there's a swag that drops down about 30 foot elevation. It's just a slow descend and a slow rise. Right as my headlights came over, and they were on bright, as my lights came over, it illuminated the oncoming hill, and then my light went down into the swag. When it did, crossing the highway, and this thing was already in the center, but on the center line, and it was going across toward my left. Like it was fixing to cross the oncoming lane, but it was on two legs, totally covered in black hair, upright, running across the road, and its eyes looked like they were bigger than golf balls, way bigger than golf balls. I would dare say nearly as big as a racquetball. But they were glowing like not really a dark red, but kind of an orangey red. And that thing, it streaked across the road, and I watched it jump off of an embankment, about 6 or 7 foot tall embankment, and hit the ground at the bottom, and then go into the timberline. But that is the 3 sightings where I have laid eyes on it. 2 of them's been daytime, and 1 of them at 3:30 in the morning-ish, somewhere like that. But that was in 2020, and I think it was around April or so of 2020, maybe the end of April, maybe first part of May. Like I said, I would dare say that I've been a lot of encounters, and I've only seen them 3 times. 3 times. Now, I've had them close. I've had them way closer than I wanted. Matter of fact, I'll just tell you the closest I've had one, and one of the times that I've been more surprised, and if, as my grandpa said, if I'd have thought of it, I'd have shit on myself. I was coming out of that upper field that I keep telling you about. And I stayed in there a little later than I should have.
Well, this concludes part 3 of our story time with Greg. And we hope to see you again in part 4. As always, remember, if you decide to step off the pavement, if you decide to step off the trail and get back into places where people normally don't go, you need to be mentally, physically, and emotionally prepared for what you may encounter. Take care. God bless. We love you. And until next time, have a great day.